Have you ever wondered, why does it work that way? Or thought, how can we thrive with Medicare Advantage under these conditions? You're not alone. Jenn has wondered all those things and more. Every month, join Jenn Kerfoot and a motley crew of friends as they bring you candid conversations with industry pros, break down important updates, and share insider tips to boost star ratings. Whether you've been around since before Medicare had the advantage or are just starting out, there's always something new to learn. Welcome to Stars Unscripted.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. You're on with me, Jenn Kerfoot, for episode 1 of Stars Unscripted. I'm super excited today on National Hug a Star Leaders Day. I'm officially calling it. We are here today to break down our first reactions to 2025 star ratings. I'm joined with two of my favorite people in the entire world, Jessica and Nate. You guys want to tell the people who you are?
Sure, I can start. Jessica Assefa. I run a very small consulting firm focused heavily on star ratings and Medicare Advantage star ratings. I've been doing that for a few years. Prior to that, sat in the chief quality officer seat in a health plan and implemented the strategies myself for a few years. And I've kind of waffled back and forth between consulting and doing the work in a health plan. So helps me keep it real if I get my fingers in the dirt every now and then. My genesis in the healthcare space is as a nurse, so I've been on the provider side as well. And super excited.
How did I not know that you were a nurse?
I was, yeah.
You did
Literally,
Yeah,
I did not know this
geriatrics and
until this
disabilities.
moment.
Like, those are my people. That's where my heart is.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
my common thread.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the more you know.
The more you know.
Nate, do you want to tell the good people who you are?
Sure. I'm Nate Lucena. I'm the Strategy and Analytics Officer at RWC, which is a slightly less small firm than Jessica's firm. I've been here a couple years now. Before that, I spent about 6.5 years in some various corporate roles in quality at Centene.
So, if you guys had to summarize this year's star rating in one word, what would that word be? Mine is like, wow. Like, woof.
Well,
Maybe
I'm
mid-slide.
going to use...
I think we're midway down the slide.
Yeah.
I'm going to use a quintessentially Midwestern word, which is just ope.
Ope.
Or oof.
Ope. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fair. I think that I'd love to I know that we were digging in yesterday. Of course, just so all our listeners know, Jessica owes me a dessert when we were in Arizona because she was thinking maybe they wouldn't come out because of the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they did.
They blew right in.
Blew right in. Cat 5 hitting hard on a Thursday late afternoon. I think a couple different things that surprised me specifically was just kind of I don't want to say winners and losers because I think in either case, star ratings is a really great, for better or worse, metric to talk about plan success and ultimately what members later will be receiving in either richer benefits or, flexibilities around cost sharing or VBID applications in the future. So I think there's no winners or losers, but the distribution between the national plans, and then of course there's some lawsuits that are looming around in the clouds. But I just thought it was interesting to see, especially on that fact sheet around for-profit and not-for-profit plans. It definitely validated some things that I've always been like, I wonder, but never really dug around in that rabbit hole. But curious to hear what you guys thought in terms of your first look, and also, what are you hearing, ear to the ground, feet on the street?
I tended to look a little bit first at kind of some of those big nationals and what they were doing before I looked, because we kind of already knew what was going to happen in our book of business, right, with some of the single state plans. So we all already knew what was going to happen with Humana, right? There was kind of a precursor out there in the news, but it was really interesting to look and, see what were the measures that maybe were kind of driving that decline down. It seemed pretty widespread, actually, across both Part C and Part D measures in terms of the distribution of performance across all of their contracts. And then a nice rebound for Kaiser, I would say, which was really something to see after kind of what happened last year. So, yeah.
No, absolutely.
And Centene just kind of a little improvement, but still sitting squarely in the struggle box there, I think.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
know. I was really rooting for
I
them.
know.
It's like it could be your year,
Yeah.
especially after last year. We did see though there was less, I think, 2-star plans. Definitely some movement from those lower performing plans up, and then we saw just some like it's almost like an even kind of curve going down, like a in distribution wise, like some lower performing plans went up, and then some higher performing plans went down. In terms of like just any surprises on any measures? I know like when Plan Preview 2 came out, there was a lot of like maybe consternation that I was hearing, especially around CBP. Of course, we can't get through an episode without me getting your thoughts around TTY. Um, Nate, yes, we're going to talk about it. But what do you guys think about like individual measures? And was there like anything in particular that that was really surprising to you, or did everything kind of shake out how you guys were thinking?
For me, just in general, from a little bit of a higher level, I know that Nate and Rex and Mick and all the folks that dig into analytics and predict our stars' future have been talking about just this continual Tukey decline that we're going to see, that's not just like a one and done, since the ratings were recalibrated, that we're going to see that play out over the next few years. And I knew that in the back of my head, but still I color code my spreadsheets, and I was shocked to see all the red. I wasn't ready for that. So I think that just that huge decline across measures was really took me back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean TTY, I'll just jump right in.
Yeah,
so
let's just do it. I'm here for it.
A lot of consternation around those 5-star cut points, I would say, and even the 4-star ones, shifting up. And one of the things that we said in our Cut Point podcast, which is only 2 weeks old now, although it seems ages away, was, all it would take was a couple nationals to really have knocked it out of the park through that chaotic call center project that happened this year to really drive those 4 and 5-star cut points up. And when we look at the nationals, by and large, basically all of their contracts, they're all right in that 4 or 5-star range. So we actually had, despite the chaos that we were hearing during the project itself, we had a lot of really big parent organizations that performed really well across those measures, which really explains kind of why we saw that jump happen, which feels a little bit at odds with kind of what we were hearing on the ground as the project was happening. So I would say that was a big surprise.
I gotta ask, both of you, do we think that TTY is a measure that's going to withstand the test of not only time, but lawsuits? Like, is it worth just like the amount of grief that it is causing this administration?
That's really the question too. I think personally, it's just such an antiquated system that's really not broadly used by people anymore. So I'm not sure what sort of measure of quality that is anymore. I think CMS maybe needs to step up its game, or if they want to keep a measure of experience in that space, maybe move over to accuracy of questions or some other part of that call study that doesn't rely on antiquated technology.
I like that accuracy of questions asked. That, because I remember when I was at a plan, like one of my good friends and mentors, Anna, she used to say, "You never should fail this particular measure." And I recently had a conversation with her. She's like, "I probably maybe would amend my answer now just because of how crazy it's been." But I remember when I was at a plan, she's like, when it's them calling.
Right.
Like, no one asks us like, "Hi, I'm calling on behalf of my father." And I'm curious to know, at what point do I hit catastrophic? Like, members don't ask questions like that. Like, I don't think, maybe when I age into Medicare and we all age into Medicare, we're going to be those heinous members that ask the questions like that. But I agree that it's kind of an antiquated technology. And is it maybe something that goes towards like, just part of audits and then maybe a display, but is it kept in like such a prominent place? Because again, like this year is sponsored by litigators, lobbyists, and actuaries. Like if I could go back in time and be one of those 3 things, I might consider it.
Yeah. I agree. One has to believe that in the year of our Lord 2024, there are other ways to measure this, and I'll stay away from some of the survey measures for now. But there are just other ways I think that we could be measuring this, and maybe other tools that we could bring into the arsenal that are a little bit more aligned with how people consume information, consume healthcare, et cetera. And then one other thing about the TTY measures is we were doing a project on something where there's also, I know there's geographic variability in everything, but where there's a lot of plans who rely on these state relays to get some of this work done. And those things are not created equally. The state relays certainly do not view themselves as extensions of the plan. And so there's just a real disconnect here in terms of like the practical aspects of how this gets administered for the people that do use it, versus how we're assessing whether or not the plan is doing the best they can to make that available to their members.
I've never loved you more than I love you in this moment. I'm pretty sure when I was at the plan, like the relay folks in California knew my number and they would not answer my calls. Also, if you hear my dogs barking, it's because they too feel as strongly about this as we do.
I thought they might.
They really do. In terms of like Haas, I know, and if you haven't seen Jessica's articles about Haas online, please go find Nate and Jessica on LinkedIn. Jessica, I always kind of, as soon as anybody asks me a question about Haas, you're like one of the first people that I want to call just because you know it so well. And I used to say like, Caps and Haas is like doing a Rubik's Cube in the dark. Like you can only do so much. And then it's like in the good Lord's hands, the year of our Lord, as Nate would say. So curious to see your thoughts specifically around Haas and if plans maybe didn't hit the mark, what are the ways that they can really be thinking about it as we frame up next year's Haas survey?
Yeah, and we're actually mid-survey right now too, right? The survey's in focus.
Exactly.
It goes through November, so it's a timely question. There are measures that plans struggle with. I mean, when you look at that CMS fact sheet and kind of glance down the measures, those Haas measures are well below the averages for all in performance compared to the other
100%.
measures in and CMS has made it pretty clear over years of communication that they're a fan of Haas. They like it, and they're wanting to expand it. There's PF-ADL they threw out there. If they add that measure, that'll be an outcome. It's longitudinal. That's 3 triple weighted measures and 3 single weighted measures. That would make Haas almost the same composition as the whole Part D part of STARS, just Haas, right? So I think plans don't like things that they can't demonstrate to their leadership strong ROI on, right? Like, we need to close breast cancer screening gaps. We've got X many to close. Here's our strategy. We closed this many last week. We're getting our money's worth. It's happening. That's one, and they'll pour money into these one initiatives for one single measure and kind of throw their hands up at these survey measures. I think plans are really going to have to buckle down and start working these year round, incorporating Haas needs throughout health risk assessments. Make it part of the care plan. Make it identify falls as a problem, and what is your goal that you're developing with a member, and what activities, initiatives, vendors are you going to lean into to help them accomplish that goal of not falling, and how do you get that back in the hands of the interdisciplinary care team? I mean, I could preach it,
but how?
But it's really it's not an initiative with a start and stop date. It's how we need to learn to do business, how we care for our members, and that's what's spelled out in Haas rates.
Even though they're maybe like pointed at maybe like perceptions of clinical aspects of care as opposed to what we think about CAPS, like in order to actually impact them, you're going to have to treat it as an assessment, right? A self-reported assessment of experiences, period. You just have to do that. There's really no other way that you're actually going to move the needle on this, no matter how many letters you send to providers asking them to talk about bladder control, right, to their
Right.
members. Like you have to do
So
something.
triggered
all the
right now,
time.
Nate.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I think it's like just working them in an orchestrated way, as opposed to we work Haas, we work CAPS, we work HEDIS, and thinking about how you can really cross pollinate that through the year. Like, think about
Yeah.
OMW. OMW, they're going to fall, they're going to fracture a pelvis, hip, femur. You're getting admitted, you're triggering, TRC. TRC has the MRP, which is pretty much the same thing as an MTM. And then think about falls in all of that, of how you can really weave those together in a whole post-stitch charge kind of flow.
Yeah.
But then also just like for members that don't end up in the hospital and triggering that workflow, I think sometimes we focus on like kind of those specific use cases and forget like about the other members that might not fall into those more like, I don't know, I call them tangible buckets, like those cookies that you were talking about, Jessica, where it's like, I know how many colonoscopies I need to get. That's like, seems like something you can hold, you can feel. It's like very easy to articulate to a C-suite versus Haas and CAPS. It's like, we need it because we need it.
Yeah, right.
Because if we don't, we lose money. And they're like, well, don't lose money. Show me the ROI. And you're like, but how?
Yeah.
I'm sure, Nate, you definitely have seen this in a lot of the analytics that you've been doing as well, year over year.
Well, and there's for things like reducing fall risk and bladder control and things of that nature, there's a much broader business case for getting a handle on this and getting your members to trust you enough to talk to you about it, right? Like from a total cost of care, from an overall health status aspect, minimizing those falls, and even sort of minimizing the perception that members have of how likely they are to fall, if they're not actually likely, or making them more educated about the situations in which they could have a fall. Right? There's really broad implications for making sure that you're figuring that out and that your members understand that they can talk to you or their providers about it. So broadening it out and not being so kind of myopic about the question, which we see people do this on Haas and CAPS. It's like teaching to the test, but there's a reason those questions are in there. And the reason is not just to answer the question. It's because that the answer to that question has much broader implications for how you manage the health of your population. So just reminding all the plans out there, maybe it sucks and maybe you don't want to do it, but if you think about it in that way, it can start to make a little bit more sense.
Don't teach to the test. You heard it here, folks. Nate Lucena. In terms of CAPS, one of the really interesting things that I thought about the data is that to achieve that 4-star plus, you had to succeed in CAPS. And I talked to a ton of our clients, a ton of people and different plan friends of mine, and they're like, woof, that's where it got us. Like we can actually, one person I was talking to, he's like, I can pinpoint the moment I knew that it was going to be a bad fourth quarter for us. And I was just thinking, maybe I take my PTO during the week that we're in right now. Because I believe it was the 189 plans that got a 4 or higher, 82% of them had like minimum CAPS across those 3.5 stars. And so I think it's really difficult for CAPS. Like again, HEDIS, we can touch, we can feel, we can talk about it in terms of like almost like bean counting. Don't even get me started on exclusions. But like, whereas CAPS is like, one, we don't know who's getting it. And of the people who get it, we don't know who's going to respond. And this year we had, digital too, which plus or minus could be good or could it be bad? And then we have on top of that the question of oversample or not oversample. So it just seems like it's really hard, especially around CAPS, but it seems like it was a really critical thing for those, plans that got 4 and above. So curious to see how you guys are thinking about CAPS because I really dislike it. Everyone who knows me knows I love me some HEDIS, mainly for the reasons we've all just listed. And also because I just really hate arguing with C-suite people about why we need to invest in things and just screaming into, nothing. But love to hear your guys' thoughts.
Well, so you hate CAPS.
It's just like it's a Rubik's Cube.
Philosophically, okay, but
all of the above. I think it's bad culturally and linguistically. Like it's not like equitable. Like
okay.
That's
how
true.
people. I could talk for hours about how much I hate CAPS for a myriad of reasons.
I'm with you on all the
philosophical.
As a tool, it's not my favorite. So when I talk about CAPS, I get on my soapbox a lot about in my previous life when I used to do things like research, we used to give people surveys a lot, right? And we would even sometimes use those surveys to come to conclusions about the future implications of their health or something like that. If we had a survey where at the unit of measurement, the range of performance was that restricted and the response rates were that low, but a lot of times we wouldn't be able to necessarily use that tool, right? It wouldn't necessarily get like published in a peer-reviewed article. So it is kind of, I get the reason why we want self-reported measures of experience from our members. But with all of the adjustments that happen and the sampling and the case mix and all of these things that are just kind of stacked on top of one another, it really obscures like what number will get me the result that I want, right? Plans can't even really know that because they might get downgraded or what have you. But then B, like how much of a difference in experience is a 93 versus a 97? Right? Should that really be the difference between 2 and 5 stars? I'm not convinced that that's actually giving us meaningful differences in experience.
Yeah,
I really like that. I like that thought too. I mean, Jessica, I know that like when you and I talk about caps, like I remember like us having a conversation about Oregon, where I'm from and where your members used to be at. And I talked about like Bi-Mart exiting was a big deal because you could buy like cheese puffs, ammunition, fishing supplies, and also get your prescriptions and DVDs and CDs, cassette tapes as well. It was a real smorgasbord, but the people of Oregon and Idaho love them some Bi-Mart. And when
sounds very hipster.
It is, right? It's Oregon hipster. Like it was a real issue around like getting needed prescription drugs. And that's something that you had nothing control of as a plan. Like the fact that Bi-Mart decided like we don't want to do drugs anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents calling me and being like, we don't want to go to Walgreens. We hate Walgreens. We really liked going to Bi-Mart. And so like when you're thinking about caps, like I know you heard like me and Nate, we have our own qualms, but like, do you like it? Do you hate it? We won't judge you if you love it.
No, I don't love caps. I don't have a proposal for something better to replace it with. So in the interim, we'll live with it. But yeah, I think it's becomes increasingly hard as we become remote workers, right? And health plans become remotely located. So we talk about all this going on in Oregon, and you're sitting there in Colorado, and I'm sitting here in Minnesota, and we're both responsible to some degree for what's going on how do we know what's going on in Oregon? I think as leaders in the experience space, you need to make effort to like do boring things like routinely read the Oregon news and routinely touch base, and right, you need to do these things because these are the headlines impacting your people. So if we don't do these things, how do we know that wildfires are going on in Oregon? How do we know that Bi-Mart closed? And we're just twiddling our thumbs trying to figure out why the heck do we do so bad in getting needed drugs and rating of the drug plan? Well, no one can get drugs because they're right. So knowing that allows you to try to strategize and work around that. I think at that point we had partnered, leaned heavily into a mail order courier service to fill the gap, and sent letters out to members, saying, hey, we know what's going on. We see what you're going through, and touchy-feely warm hug. Here's an alternative for you, right? If nothing else, an interim solution. And I think it went a long way in improving adherence scores for those folks. And caps.
No, I love that you like can kind of tie like something that is so speculative, like caps, to a measure that we definitely, again, that you can touch, that you can feel, like around like medication adherence. So I think like really looking at them, like where are they connected? What's our leading indicators? What are our lagging indicators? And also like really committing as leaders to, reading the Oregonian and knowing what's going on. Or feel free, if you're in Oregon, to call my parents. I'm sure they'll tell you everything that you want to hear about that. Feel free. They would love to talk to you about Oregon.
And then like that equity space. I mean, when you talk about is it equitable and is it a reasonable tool to accurately capture the experiences of several different cultures of people that probably weren't so present in this country when those questions were formulated, right? I also had experience working with a health plan here in Minnesota where to improve caps, like we did off-cycle and found our lowest, that lowest group of folks that were dragging rates down. And they were largely Hmong and Somali members. And to improve caps, we had to start at this. What do you mean number 1 means I'm not happy? What does number 5 have to do with I'm kind of happy? Like, just tying numbers to feelings to a survey was a completely foreign concept for these folks. So we were,
because number 1 is number 1.
We had a couple members proudly tell us they gave us number 1. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So everyone, it isn't. I mean, we could go on. I'm sure everyone has cap stories.
Well, listen, I'm like,
he's about to get on a soapbox.
I'm not going to do it.
No, don't do that to me.
All I was going to do was say I smell a really good conference session here because, I mean, testing bias just in general, I don't know why we would ever expect that we are immune to it in healthcare. And case mix adjustment does not fix it. So
no.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You're just going to pull that pen, Nate, and just like set it there and be like, I'm going to set this here.
Yeah, just think about it over the weekend. Think about it over the weekend, everybody.
I mean, big thoughts. I think we definitely have to bring like health equity into this conversation because and also not over rotate. So interestingly enough, I got a mailer from my health plan the other day, and I had just done a survey that did about like ethnicity and race. And of course I bubbled like Asian and then not Hispanic. But what was interesting is that then I got a mailer that was predominantly just not just one flavor of Asian, but all Asian, like Korean and Japanese and Chinese, all represented. And, the plan sent me that. I understand that. But also, like, I'm adopted. My parents are white. And I largely identify as being, like, gay and a veteran over being, like, Korean. And so it's like a real over-rotation where I was like, well, now you're just kind of like, it's like almost like disingenuous when it's like done so monolithically. And so I think there is a balance where we, one, offer culturally and linguistically appropriate services and care, but also we don't over rotate where then we just kind of lose the plot.
Yeah, where you're pushing people in boxes they don't belong in. And
I don't want to be in that box. I'm happy in the gay box though.
Yeah, no. So knowing that they don't have a flyer for that though, unfortunately. But
I want that.
Knowing demographics is not a substitute for knowing preference of the person, right? Like those two things should go together such that when you know the preference of the person, you can deliver it in a culturally sort of responsible way. But it's not a substitute. It's not saying that you know everything about the proper channel phrasing, etc. To really help a health plan member or beneficiary access their care just because you know that demographic, right? That you still have to know what their sort of personal preferences are and what's actually going to reach and help them.
Say it louder for the folks in the back. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I am in conversations where I'm just like, that's your plan? Like that's not knowing your members. That's being able to collect data very efficiently and then just putting everyone into boxes, and we really lose intersectionality in what makes our members. Like if you look at Oregon, like you cut Oregon down the Cascades, on the left side of the Cascades where you have like Portland, Salem, Eugene. I'm talking about Oregon cities, everyone. But then on the other side, you have very rural areas. It's very different in terms of their beliefs, where they could be, English speaking and Caucasian, but they're going to have very fundamental differences in their motivations for their health, how well they feel about their health, and also their levels of health literacy. And I think that and I know it's difficult to kind of do that Rubik's Cube, and it's a hard exercise to have as leaders, but I think it's definitely worth a conversation. I could talk about this for hours with you all, as our listeners probably could tell. So I have to ask you both a question, which I did not tell you I was going to ask you guys. So surprise. Conversely, star ratings was interesting this year, but we had the landscape files and the PPP files come out before. And so in looking at the data, 7% of the Medicare Advantage market is losing their plan in 2025. So all these plans made investments in star ratings. Maybe your star rating went up, maybe it went down, and maybe you exited a market and maybe you didn't. And you might be gaining members, which we refer to lovingly sometimes as adverse selection, which I don't like the name of that, but we say it all the time, like ER deferment and things like that we're not supposed to say, but sometimes we still say them. But what is that going to do as we look forward to like next year. And, the members that are going to be coming to the plan, I did a fun little exercise that I'm almost done with of mapping the markets that exited either by a service area reduction or just by terminating a contract to area deprivation index, because I have a strong hypothesis that some plans that are exiting are actually in the areas where members desperately need a Medicare Advantage plan.
Yeah.
So what is this going to do to Stars? And we've just been talking a lot about health equity. What are your guys' thoughts on what we're looking at for next year? Nate's face says it all.
Listen, people are making business decisions about service areas and benefits, and about, they're looking county by county at different profitability metrics and things of that nature. And we can understand why they have to do that, but also go through sort of the thought experiment of what you're doing, Jenn, and saying, but what are the downstream consequences of that? What are the variables that aren't making it into that analysis where there are needs of specific communities that it will be even harder for them to meet, because companies feel like they have to make these business decisions. That's not an answer, but
Yeah.
That's fair. I think I'm just like, I don't want to say concerned. I don't want to be like the person that's always wringing my hands. But as we think about SNSE that's currently on display, we think about in CMS has indicated that looming Haws measure that really ties to SNSE with not only did you get an intervention, but how'd you feel about that intervention? And also as we transition into this new reward factor, health equity index, I can't help but thinking, I don't want to say short-sighted, but I want to say what is the plan, folks? What's the plan? It's an investment.
I don't know that there's a plan, a long-term plan, by and large.
Don't say that. I like going to bed at night thinking there are some people that have the plan and maybe I just haven't seen it.
I didn't say nobody has a plan. I said by and large, I'm not sure that that's making it into the calculus yet, right? Because that's even though it's already happening, right? That's a year down the road, but we see seven contracts at 5 stars.
Yeah.
Right. So the upper end of that distribution kind of shifting downward. There is still a hold harmless provision to bump that up, right, to only plans that are already at 5 stars. I mean, you do that now, right, when there's fewer plans than ever in that 5-star range. Yeah. And then you're knocking the 4.5-star plans, down even more, and also impacting some of the 4-star plans, right, to save that QBP revenue. I don't broadly sense a plan, a consensus across the industry, consistently across parent organizations to deal with it, even though everybody knows it's happening and that it's coming.
I don't know if I didn't put thought to whether I assumed there was a plan. It didn't enter my mind that there could not be one. So under the assumption that there's a plan, I just was trying to look through what I saw happening across the nation when the ratings data became available to us yesterday, and just trying to kind of piece together a little bit in the 10 minutes we've had the data in our hands, what impact might that have on the health equity index, right? So we've got those 7 contracts that perform at the 5-star level. Weren't 6 of them SNPs?
I don't know the exact count, maybe? But yeah, several.
So they're almost.
We did see increased in that's where it's growing this year. I can't tell you guys how many articles I've seen SNP is the way to go. We saw growth in D-SNPs a lot. Secondary to that, C-SNPs. Do we get back to the basics? Yeah. We see scan differentiating, adding a new product line this year specifically for Asian Americans. Is it that we need to think about the segmentations of our population more thoughtfully?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, so with these high performers, and you're dividing performance brackets for that reward into thirds, what does that do to the upper third? And then at the same time, we see a disproportionate number of SNPs dropping off due to past performance issues, right? So there's like, of all the plans with past performance penalties, whether it was strike 2 or strike 3, there's 16 were SNP versus 8 non-SNP. So like double are dropping off the end, and they're disproportionately making up the top. So that made me a little bit scared for what those, how that might play out in those HEI performance levels.
I didn't even think about that. It's like new fear unlocked.
Yeah, here's something else to be scared of.
Thanks.
Caps
No,
and
it's
TTY
bad.
didn't do it.
It's like dark days, friends. Like I kept thinking about when I kept looking at stars, I kept getting distracted because I keep telling a lot of people at Duos, it's this, we're seeing like a convergence of so many changes and just so many, like, I don't want to say adverse things, but things that aren't typically in the wheelhouse. Like we see the Part D redesign. We see the Medicare prescription payment plan this year. Like just this week, we saw the $2 demonstration program. There's so many new things that just seem to be colliding. And it makes me wonder, are we going to still see growth because, in large part, we have bipartisan support? Or have we hit this like weird tipping point that I think 2025 is really going to pressure test the longevity of the program? I mean, I really hope, because I think it's still better. Like people can quote me on it, still better than fee for service. But is it what will last, especially for the folks that need it most, like within these areas where we're seeing service area reductions? And that's what's concerning to me.
These new market entries, like how does a new market entry, I mean, CMS in every single fact sheet every year shows us how plans with longevity significantly outperform compared to plans with less than 5 years, right? But maybe catching up was a possibility with the old Stars world and the old cut points, but how does a new entry expect to make it? When I was looking at plans that got two strikes, the Part C or D summary rating below 3 stars 2 years in a row and then 3 years in a row, 7, what was it? I wrote it here somewhere. Yeah. So 7 didn't even have enough Part C data because there was proportionally less Part D measures, right? So you'll often report a Part D measure before C. Well, if that's below 2 stars, that's strike 1 for you, even if you don't have an overall star rating yet, right?
So you're like out before it's even started.
That are strike 2 that they're not even old enough to report a rating. They're just baby plans. So they might term out before they ever get a star rating.
No, not the baby plans. Will you call them baby plans? Like I see it like a mental image of like small babies, and I'm like, no, not the babies.
Not the babies.
But I do think there's something about like, it like where we see a large part of the contract terminations, obviously no surprise to you all, Aetna, Humana, UHC, and Centene. Okay, 75% of total terminations, so 75% of 2 million members that lost their plan. Okay, well, who's going into them? If what you said, Jess, like if the baby plans can't make it and the big plans, the big adults or whatever we're calling them, are leaving, well then who's taking care of those members? Maybe the juvenile plans?
I guess.
Is it like we'll have to follow up? I'll have to get your take on like the sandwich generation plans. But I think there's a lot to unpack here. I think that, we have AEP coming up in 4 days. In large part, reading the lawsuits, they're like, this is going to cause material harm to our reputation because AEP is here. And so, I think this is going to be the wildest AEP. I've never been I was like this. I was like, thank you. I'm not at a plan right now. Sorry to all the health plans out there, because this is I can't imagine being at a plan right now and going through AEP between the FMOs and the brokers, and Centene's not paying those Part D commissions or the PDP commissions. It's like a wild, wild west out there, and I'm just I'm rooting for everyone.
Me too. I love being able to help everybody try to figure this out.
Same.
What you're talking about is really important, and one of the things that I know we sort of harp with our clients about, and I know Jessica does too, is for the Stars leaders, you have to elbow your way into that conversation and make sure that you're bringing some of this intel that the Star leaders that work with us, of course, they have the deepest intel, right? But bring it to the table, right? So that it's not an afterthought, because Stars leaders have to operate in 3 years at one time. They're They're very used to looking back and then pushing themselves to look forward. Sometimes it's hard, depending on when in the year it is, but really elbowing your way to that table so that you can bring that sort of broader perspective in and make sure that it's into account so that people understand the consequences of the decisions that you're making today for what might be a STAR goal that you have for the next 2 years, right? And when those things are in opposition, trying to understand that before you make the decision.
So well said. I think every presentation I've ever done to upper level leadership has always started with the STAR ratings timeline, right? Like, yeah, we lost money because of what Joe Smith did 2 years ago, right?
Right. Build a time machine.
No,
go find Doc Brown.
Yeah, just to remind folks that what a long game it is, right? And how
that's hard.
We have to be.
Like, it's super hard though. Like when, especially I know we talked about the baby plans, but I'm going to shift a minute and talk about like the large plans. Like when you are that size and you're talking about not revenue based on QBP in like, hundreds of thousands or millions, but billions of dollars. And you have, shareholders and you're a publicly traded company. That's really difficult. And I think being able to orient people around like the urgency, but also that then like kind of shoring up those more sure bet kind of like tangible cookies like we talked about with HEDIS, I think is so critically important.
Yeah.
And then calling Jess or Nate for some great consulting if you need help championing that. They have like a hamburger phone. They have like a bat phone. There's a signal for both of them. Like, I don't know what it's called, but like you can find it on LinkedIn. But I'm just so thankful to you both for being like, one, a wealth of knowledge that like to all the STAR leaders out there, it is hard to do this work. It's even harder if you're doing it alone. I can't even count the amount of STAR rating leaders that are like, I have no friends that I can even just talk to. So like, I'm really thankful to Jess and Nate because doing this kind of work without folks like you guys to just call and be like, am I crazy? Or did I forget something that I thought I knew really well because I don't remember what year I'm in? Like it happens. And so I just really appreciate you guys.
All the time.
Back in the day when we used checks, I used to always write the wrong year on my checks. I've been in Stars.
I still do that.
Because of Stars.
We need like a rehab center. But thank you guys for joining me on Friday. I'm sure we'll have more conversations to come.
Can we have a quick departing thought?
Yeah, departing thought.
Yeah, this was a quick departing thought. Just, with the recent hurricanes and what large areas they covered, all of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, right? And the massive flooding and the entire state of Florida being a FEMA declared natural disaster area. I'm just curious to see, and we've got tons of big players down there, Humana and United and all the Cigna, what impact if their data is pulled out of the cut points, if they meet that 60%, what that's going to look like for STAR year 27.
New fear unlocked.
Yeah.
Agreed. So it's fortuitous that you bring that up because I actually did pose a similar question directly to CMS, and so we'll see what answer we get, and when we get that answer, then we'll share
Part
that information.
2.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can't beat either of those parting thoughts. So I'm just going to say, everyone have a happy, safe weekend. Don't forget to hug your STAR ratings leader. Doesn't matter if they did really, really well or they didn't do as well as you were hoping they were going to do. Give them a hug. They're doing the good Lord's work. And we sure do appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.